71 BCE. Southern Italy burns in chaos. A former gladiator has outwitted the Roman legions for 2 years. But now, the rebellion ends. This is the battle of the Silarus, where Spartacus made his final stand. Part 1. The Rebellion, a city of wealth, gladiator schools, and blood. In a world where human life could be bought, sold, and broken for sport, one man refused to bow. Spartacus, a Thracian warrior turned gladiator, didn't plan to start a revolution. But when the opportunity came, he seized it. With about 70 fellow slaves, he overpowered guards with kitchen knives and cleavers, stormed out of the gladiator barracks, and fled into the countryside. They weren't trained soldiers, not yet, but they were desperate, hardened, and above all, free. They raided wagons, captured weapons, and took refuge on Mount Vesuvius. Roman forces underestimated them, a mistake they would pay for in blood. According to Plutarch, the rebels used vines to rappel down the cliffs behind the Roman lines and launch a surprise attack. Entire Roman detachments were wiped out. Word spread quickly. Across the farms, the mines, the villas. Slaves heard a name whispered like wildfire. Spartacus. They came in droves. Men, women, children. Escaping a lifetime of chains to follow a man who had done the impossible, defied Rome, and lived. Within weeks, the rebels numbered thousands. Within months, tens of thousands. Some were former soldiers. Others had never held a blade. But now they marched together, driven by a cause Rome could never understand. Freedom. Spartacus was no mere brute. He was a strategist, a visionary. He trained his army. He instilled discipline. And unlike the corrupt generals of Rome, he led from the front. This wasn't just a slave uprising. It was an indictment of everything the Roman Republic stood on. For centuries, the elite had lived in luxury, while millions toiled in silence. But Spartacus gave the voiceless a sword. They didn't just survive, they won. Spartacus defeated multiple Roman armies. He humiliated 2 consuls. He marched up and down the Italian peninsula, free, untouchable, legendary. And then, he made his most debated decision. He could have led his people across the Alps, to safety, to freedom beyond Roman borders. But he didn't. Some say he tried, but the army refused. They wanted revenge, not escape. Others say Spartacus himself turned back, determined to strike at the heart of the empire that had enslaved them. What we know is this. Spartacus turned south again, towards Sicily, hoping to secure ships from pirates to escape. But Rome was watching, Rome was learning, and Rome had found its answer to Spartacus in a man named Crassus. Cold, calculating, and unimaginably wealthy, Crassus didn't just want victory, he wanted control. He built new legions, restored discipline through brutal punishments, including the ancient and terrifying practice of decimation. Then, like a hunter, he began closing the net, trapping Spartacus, isolating him, starving his army of options. By 71 BCE, the rebellion was bleeding, weary, cornered, and on the banks of the Silarus River, Spartacus would lead his final charge. But not before becoming something more than a man. Not before becoming a symbol. Part 2. Crassus enters the war. As Spartacus tore through Italy, Rome was humiliated. 2 consular armies had already been destroyed. The Senate's finest commanders had failed to crush what they saw as a mob of runaway slaves. And so, Rome turned not to tradition, but to ambition. Marcus Licinius Crassus, a man of immense wealth, towering ego, and cold pragmatism. Crassus wasn't a noble general from an ancient line. He had bought his power. Now he intended to buy glory. He was the richest man in the Republic, a real estate tycoon, a loan shark, and a ruthless opportunist who famously profited off the misery of others, even buying burning buildings to sell them back to desperate owners. Now he bought something else: supreme military authority. The Senate gave Crassus proconsular imperium, emergency powers. He was granted 6 legions, which he soon raised to 8 by recruiting and training thousands of new soldiers. Unlike his predecessors, Crassus didn't trust his men to win, so he ruled them through fear. Ancient sources say he reinstated one of Rome's oldest, most brutal punishments: decimation. When a unit disobeyed or fled in cowardice, he ordered every 10th man executed by their fellow soldiers. No mercy, no exception. Crassus didn't want loyalty. He demanded obedience. But Crassus wasn't just cruel. He was calculated. He avoided the reckless frontal assaults that had doomed his predecessors. Instead, he sought to control the terrain, cut off supplies, box Spartacus in, deny him room to maneuver. The general who had outwitted Rome for 2 years was now being cornered like prey. Crassus forced Spartacus south, away from the central heart of Italy. Desperate, Spartacus turned to an unlikely hope: pirates. He negotiated with Cilician pirate lords to ferry his army across to Sicily, where he could reignite rebellion and regroup. But Rome's influence reached even the sea. The pirates took Spartacus's gold and vanished, trapped, betrayed, surrounded. The dream of escape died on the shores of southern Italy. Spartacus was now cut off, between Crassus' legions to the north and the sea to the south. His men, once over 70,000 strong, had dwindled. Supplies ran low. Morale began to crack. And Crassus, he didn't rush. He waited. He fortified positions, dug trenches, built walls, let the rebels weaken, starve, and bleed. But Spartacus wasn't ready to die behind a wall. He broke through Roman lines in a daring nighttime assault, cutting through Crassus's siege works and escaping once again into the open countryside. Yet he knew what was coming. He didn't flee. He didn't run. Instead, he turned to fight. One last time, the final battle would take place on the banks of the Silarus River. Crassus, with over 50,000 disciplined legionaries, would face the last stand of the rebel army, just over 30,000 survivors, weary, wounded, and determined to die free. It was no longer about winning. For Spartacus, it was about choosing how the story would end. Part 3. The end had come. Spring, 71 BCE. After 2 years of rebellion, 2 years of victory, and 2 years of defying the Roman war machine, Spartacus stood with the remnants of his army on the plains near the Silarus River in southern Italy. He had once commanded 70,000. Now, perhaps 30,000 remained. Exhausted, underfed, and outnumbered. Many were wounded, few had proper arms, fewer still had hope. But what they lacked in weapons, they made up for in will. Across the field stood the army of Marcus Licinius Crassus, a juggernaut of 8 Roman legions, nearly 50,000 strong, arrayed in full force. Fresh armor gleamed in the sun. Standards fluttered, orders echoed through the lines with perfect Roman precision. Rome had sent one of its coldest minds to extinguish one of its hottest fires. Spartacus? He didn't flee. He didn't hide. He cut his horse loose, a symbol that there would be no retreat, no surrender. He would either win as a free man or die as one. According to Plutarch, Spartacus sought out Crassus himself on the battlefield, cutting a direct path through the Roman lines, as if to challenge the general in single combat. He was wounded twice, but he fought on. Like a man possessed, the battle began with a full Roman advance. Shields locked, Piela thrown, the heavy thunder of marching legionaries shook the earth. Spartacus rallied his men into one final charge. It wasn't strategy, It wasn't a formation. It was a cry from the depths of human suffering, a desperate roar for dignity. They slammed into the Roman line with every ounce of fury left in their bones. Barefoot men with rusted blades fought trained killers with steel. Slaves who had once served wine in villas now struck down knights of the Republic. The fields of Silarus became a sea of blood, chaos, and broken bodies. But there could be only one outcome. The Roman machine was too strong, too disciplined, too well supplied. The rebels, brave as they were, began to fall, slowly at first, then in waves, encircled, surrounded, overwhelmed. Spartacus, wounded and fighting from the front, was finally brought down. His body was never found, perhaps torn apart in the frenzy of the melee, perhaps lost under a pile of the dead. But he died as he lived, unbowed, sword in hand. When the dust settled, over 30,000 rebels lay dead. It was a massacre. Crassus had won. The Republic had triumphed, and Rome, ever theatrical in its cruelty, made its final statement. 6,000 captured survivors were crucified along the Appian Way, the road between Capua and Rome. Their bodies lined the road for over 120 miles, a grisly warning carved into the very bones of the Republic.